I'm really excited for you to hear this interview with Dr. Sara Pugh. Sara is my quantum biology friend. We actually connected. We've both trained in mental health nutrition. And then I realized that we were in two of the same training groups with the quantum biology group, but also ketogenic diets for mental health. And so we have had another conversation. You can go find that on my YouTube channel. Sara has her YouTube channel. It's fantastic too. And Sara does all kinds of things, hypnosis and other kinds of modalities. She's a brilliant scientist. And we had a really great conversation about chaos and from chaos to order. So you have to listen all the way to the end because it gets really, really good. Towards the end, you're not going to want to miss that part. So this is the last episode in this quantum health series. Don't worry, I'm going to keep having quantum health folks on so that we can keep learning more about how to implement quantum health strategies into our lives so that we can benefit from that. But we're going to end here with Dr. Sara Pugh for the quantum biology series and then circle back to nutrition. So I'm really excited to have a whole nother series on nutrition, kind of picking up where we left off with Nina Teicholz, the New York Times bestselling author of Big Fat Surprise. So if you didn't listen to that one, you go back and listen. It's awesome. She is fantastic. It's all about nutrition, science, truth. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of things on nutrition and just really exciting episodes coming up. All really fantastic people. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate it when you listen to the show. Hi, Sara. Welcome back. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I always enjoy talking with you. I love your brilliant mind, and I also really appreciate how you bring really kind of complicated science to with your metaphors and ways for us to understand it. And so I really appreciate that you can make sense out of it for me.
Okay, great. So, Dr. Kelli, I love talking to you because obviously, we're on the same page. And I think it's something that now that there are sort of things like Dr. Huberman talking about genetics and heritability, the stuff that we may end up going down today, people might think, well, okay, this is a bit esoteric, but it's all proven. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about whatever we're going to go down and how we can help people and give them hope about if they're stuck somewhere, and let's just get going.
Yeah, I do like that. If somebody's stuck somewhere, that we can hopefully give them some hope. So you are the last bringing up the rear of this quantum biology series that I've been doing. So we're going to bring it, not that we're going to ever quit, right? Because quantum biology is so amazing and wonderful, but some people may just now be jumping in. So it might be helpful if we talk a little bit about what is quantum biology first, and then maybe talk about some of the chaos, as we call it, the infections and trauma and different things that we encounter that we would call chaos.
Absolutely. I think when it comes to the word quantum and physics, people get nervous because they think it's going to be maths and they won't be able to understand, but it's very relatable to daily life. So when I'm explaining to a new client about quantum biology, I say it's about, you can view yourself as an energy body, a water body, a light body, and a lot of people do that anyway. But then for a more scientific person, I would say, well, we can break atoms down into protons and electrons because fundamentally we are just made of atoms. And when we look at an atom, it's just nothing. Really, it's like 99% empty space. And then if you look right inside, there's a sort of electromagnetic core. So it gets a bit strange in some ways, but then I can explain to people, well, if we're just atoms, things like light and sound are going to affect us massively. Also, when we take in food, it's not just about calories and macros and stuff like that. It's about information. And we'll probably end up talking about water today and memory and trauma. And again, this is very quantum because nobody actually knows where we store memories in the body. is it in our, there's no science to show it's in our brains because there's no memory trace we've ever found. Anybody who's done movement therapy will know that trauma can be stored in the body. So maybe it's the structured water. The mitochondria themselves have a memory because they're a living entity themselves. And some people think that that's why they have a sixth sense or a psychic, whereas friends of mine who are psychic mediums would say, no, you know, you're interacting with the universe. And as a physicist or a biophysicist, I would say, actually, there's lots of studies now on the ether. So it's not woo-woo anymore. And anybody who's worked in energy medicine and is sworn blind that all of stuff to do with humans being sort of telepathic and memories being passed down through your family is not nonsense will be very happy knowing now that there's science. So fundamentally, what I want to say is that quantum biology just looks beyond us being a lump of flesh, because we've got plenty of people who, well, I know plenty of people who are much better than me at nutrition or functional medicine, but it still just doesn't work. So it's about, well, what else is there that we can look at that we can apply to the general population? Because quantum physics, even though it sounds complicated, the actual practical application is very, very simple. And I think we'll probably dive into that shortly.
Yeah, I think it's important to get to how simple it is. I think that's the piece that is so exciting for me, is that I am not a quantum physicist. So, and I understand this, and what the impact that it's had on my life. Just understanding mitochondrial health has been very helpful. Understanding how to have healthier mitochondria so that we drive health, and these dysfunctional mitochondria, which drive disease. But wherever you want to go with this, I'm happy to go wherever you want to go. I really like when I asked you, like, what's your favorite aspect of quantum biology? What do you really want to talk about? The first thing you said was chaos. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the chaos and
Oh,
trauma.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So when we look at inflammation from a biological perspective, a lot of people think it's just a bee sting or a sprained ankle. But when we break it down into sort of physics terms, now that people are comfortable that it's a bona fide science talking about electrons and protons as the human body. So when it comes to chaos, we can think about inflammation as being a situation where there's chaos in the body. So just to make it as a big thing, chaos in the body could mean that you've got a terrible body clock and your brain doesn't know what time it is, and that would create chaos and anxiety. And anything, when we talk about quantum physics, there's something called the uncertainty principle, and we won't go into it, but we'll just translate it into daily life, that whenever there's uncertainty in our daily life, it creates anxiety. So that would be the first thing. If your brain doesn't know what time it is and whether you should be detoxing or eating or going for a run, that's going to create chaos. Then if we bring it down a level into the nervous system, which we may again talk about, if your brain doesn't know where bits of your body are in space, it's going to become uncomfortable and anxious. And that's why movement, which not only creates structured water in your collagen, but also stimulates your frontal lobe, is going to limit the amount of chaos. But also grounding is really important, because that not only tells you where your joints are in space, but it tells you where you are on the planet. And I'm sure a lot of people do grounding already and have thought about it from electrons. But when it comes to chaos, if we don't know where we are in space or on the planet, that's going to cause an amount of distress and anxiety to our bodies. Then if we get even smaller again into the mitochondria and food, just a very simple example, if we eat stuff that's come from a factory, that's processed food, it's going to not be information like a plant or fresh meat. It's going to be all jangled up and mixed up with a load of chemicals. So we're going to be putting in chaotic information, as in data in versus data out, if anybody's a computer person. So if we put bad data in, as in bad food that's horrible from a factory that's very processed, it's going to create chaos in the mitochondria. And every single scientist and everybody agrees that processed food is a great recipe for inflammation. Then on a more quantum biology level, say if I live in the UK and we don't have pineapple trees or coconut trees here, if I was to eat a pineapple right now, because it's the middle of winter here, it's going to give confusing information to my body of where I am on the planet. And that could in itself create chaos and inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
The other aspect that you mentioned was scar tissue, that
Yes.
obviously, this is really important, because are we talking about a torn muscle, or are we talking about trauma? Because again, people like Dr. Caroline Leaf will say there's trauma being found physically in the brain. And then there are other scientists who will say, well, actually the trauma is found physically in the body. But again, it's a chaotic signal. It's something that's chaos because it's not been ordered. Because if we want to talk about quantum physics, we've got chaos and entropy, and the idea is if we want to deal with chaos, we've got to produce order into the system somehow, be it a physical trauma or a mental trauma. And just very quickly, I know people sometimes always want to know straight away, well, what can I do? There are certain supplements like nattokinase or serapeptidase which can break down physical scar tissue. I mean, if you've had it for years and years, you must never take anything like that if you've just had an operation or surgery. But some people find that physical scar tissue continues to grow and seep in their body after they've had an operation, so they get pain. And then you can actually get things which break this down and create order again. The trauma side is more complicated, but it's still very, very doable if you take the right approach, because we want to basically put order back into a chaotic memory. Because maybe you might agree that when you were 7 or 9 or something, if something happened to you, because you're not adult, you can't process it properly like we could now. Therefore, we lay down some kind of chaotic or traumatic memory somewhere, because at the time we weren't able to put order to it.
All of that. Yeah. And I do think people tend to say, well, what do I do about this? Okay, I get the chaotic. And you just brought up so many important points that I want to just make sure people are hearing, that, circadian rhythms. So helping your body clock, the main, suprachiasmatic nucleus, obviously the big one. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is that we have clocks throughout our whole body, not just from the mitochondria too, but we don't want to disorient the mitochondria by never going outside, getting fresh, light is really important for that. So honoring the light and the dark. I see you've got your blue blockers on your head too.
Oh,
So
I've got some. Yeah, these are kind of funkier. These are sort of hemifield blue blockers, but I thought I better practice what I preach and sort of have them ready on the podcast, because it's obviously later in the day than me. But yeah, carry on.
yeah. So there are things that we can do to decrease the chaos, to reorient the body to the time of year, the time of day, the season that we're in, by being outdoors, earthing. I would call it earthing, you call it grounding. Either way, we're literally grounding. And I think of that as absorbing the electrons, but you bring up a really good point, that that's not just about absorbing electrons, which is important, having bare skin on the Earth's surface, but it also helps orient us so that our body knows where we are on the planet in time and space. And I think anything that we can do to orient ourselves is our bodies, that's going to be helpful for people. And trauma. So I think it's great that we're talking about the way things get stored in the body. And I think there's some interesting information about memory and even this morphic field, which it's not like I understand morphic field that much, but memories from being a species, right? And we are contributing to the memories that the species will carry on. So in the future, it's not even our children. Like we think we're going to carry things on genetically, but it's the memories that we are contributing to the species that will not even be our children. They're in the future, assuming that the species continues. So I just think the places where we're not really sure exactly what's happening, maybe, but we can still help. We can orient the body. We can help by the foods that we eat, making sure that they are actually in season and grow near you, so that you're not confusing your body. the light, the getting outside and earthing or grounding, those kinds of things. And what else? I know that we could talk about all kinds of supplements and things. I wanted to keep it as much just the free stuff that people can do to help with. Oh, and I was thinking about trauma. Sorry, I just bring that back. You're exactly right about these unprocessed traumas, or things that people don't even realize are trauma, and they're just carrying it around. And where is that carried? It's a lot of people will talk about the brain, but we know that the whole body carries the memory of these traumas, and that we're likely still operating on a daily basis, not even realizing that some of these things are, I think of them as energetic blocks, but maybe you can talk about that a little bit better. There are places in us where, and it could be from this water, exclusion zone water, where we've had a trauma, whether it's a physical injury or a mental trauma, or something has happened and there's a walling off. And so, the flow, to get back the flow to those areas where there may be a block energetically, or in our field, I guess, our energetic field too. Does that make, am I making any sense at all here?
It makes sense, because I'll kind of translate it into my own language and then bring it back to you, just so that all the viewers can follow. So you mentioned something really important, which was a morphic field. And your viewers may or may not know that there's something called the missing heritability problem with genetics, that a lot of people know that we have genes and they get transcribed into RNA and they make a protein, which is a molecular machine. And that's all it does. It can't dictate your behavior, your instincts, or your shape, or your sort of, say, nose shape or something like that. Or if you're a flower or a plant, your leaf shape. So no matter what, we can't explain how the instincts get inherited, because it's not possible. There's no such gene or protein for how to make a spider's web if you're a spider. So how does the spider know how to make a web? And then it's actually much worse than this for humans, because even something like height, where we know it's genetic because tall parents produce tall children, the genes only account for something like 15% of the person's height. And then, because we both are very keen on mental health, it's the same for schizophrenia. We know it's genetic, but again, when we've done lots of analysis, because there's plenty of data out there now since the Human Genome Project, we've still found that, okay, 15% of the genes can account for the schizophrenia, but where does the other 85% come from? Mm-hmm. So that's when this morphic field, and this is an idea proposed by Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, and he's a very well-known scientist in the UK, and it's about this idea of, again, it would be a very quantum physics effect. So this idea of inheriting habits, behaviors, shapes and things travels through a morphic field, through time and space, through matter, which we have not yet been able to discover yet. And this is where things like CERN and the ether are important. And anybody who's into energy medicine will say, well, I knew anyway years ago that there was a particle. Just because we haven't got the science to detect something, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Therefore, me, you, anybody who's worked in trauma, had trauma, will know that no matter how much psychotherapy you have or how much medication you take, the problem is still there. So where is it? Is it in my aura? Is it in my head? Is it in my structured water? How is it there? And there's lots and lots of studies now, and people at work doing sort of family or familial timelines. And even me, when I do hypnosis or work with people now, I always ask about the family and tell me as much as possible about any relative, and guaranteed, no matter what problem I'm working with, alcoholism or whatever, there'll be an alcoholic uncle, a great uncle, or maybe lots of them. So somehow this alcoholism, this habit, this behavior has been transferred down somehow through the morphic field of this person. And I fully respect that different practitioners will just call this something else. Just scientists have their own word for it. And there's another Israeli scientist who I can't remember the name of, who's actually got a biological theory for how we inherit habits and behaviors. So when it comes to why are we who we are, there's more to it than just being a lump of flesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what about the idea of passing it on? Like we're contributing to not, I think we should dig into genetics a little bit more if you want, about how, because people can get stuck there, I think, thinking, well, it's just my genes. And I think what we're saying is that's a very small percentage of we have a lot more control than we think.
Oh, absolutely. Because I probably worried people then saying that. But when we break down the science of epigenetics and genetics, it's about 20% genetics and 80% epigenetics. So I jumped really far ahead talking about epigenetics, because when we talk about genes, we can do something called methylate them, which switches them on and off like a light switch, and that gives more flexibility. And the methylation will be sort of diet and environment dependent, so you can control that to some extent. And then above that, we've got chromatin and histones, and that's basically the wrapping around the DNA, because if the DNA was naked in the cell all the time, we would just read the genes non-stop, and it'd be like having every single electrical device in your house on all the time. And we only go into one room at a time and maybe turn on the hairdryer or the computer, and that's the same with our genetics. So that's another level of control where we can wrap and unwrap the chromatin. And interestingly, I just read a study today that serotonin is involved in wrapping and unwrapping the DNA. So again, serotonin is something people think is a happy chemical that just lives in their brain, but it actually does a lot more. So back to how can people help themselves? So first of all, it's not to think you've been dealt a bad hand by whoever created the universe or your parents. That luckily, 80% of it is genetic. And also, no matter what, even if you know about problems throughout your family lineage, like there's a huge amount of problems with a certain substance in my family, but fortunately, I was able to understand this early and do something about it. So even if you think, okay, my problem is because I come from a long line of, I don't know, overeaters or alcoholics. Yes, you might have a predisposition, you're more likely to, but it doesn't mean that you are going to become that thing, because like I said, 20% of it is your genes. And then, as we were going to talk about today, that becoming aware of a problem is also very important in tackling it as well. That yes, of course, say alcohol in my family, it's something that's very prevalent in society. It doesn't mean I'm going to become an alcoholic. I'm just aware that I probably am more likely to, and therefore I can take steps to prevent that. And also, when it comes to problems that we develop, it's very easy to blame ourselves and say, oh, I'm a terrible person, I'm useless, and I'm weak. And when sometimes you can transfer the problem elsewhere and then work with people to do, say, familial healing or movement-based therapy to get this out, you can bring the problem up and then work to get it out. And I think fundamentally it's about people not always thinking, I'm useless, I'm bad, I'm an addict, I can't help it, I've got weak willpower or whatever. It's about accepting, okay, there's some other factors that you can't control that might be at play, but you've got a huge amount of control if you move in the right direction with your situation.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree, just having done my own work and exploring different modalities,
Do you want
hypnosis.
to share that maybe?
Sorry?
Do you want to share what your own work was, maybe, so that the people can sort of catch up?
Right. Well, in the same, way, you look back at the people in your family and go, oh, so there are a lot of alcoholics. There are a lot of there are also some non-alcoholics, but I'm just thinking about doing my biological father was an alcoholic. So I was very much, especially when I was pregnant to becoming a parent, I was like, I don't want to carry my old crap, like any childhood stuff, or whatever I can clean up, I want to clean up. And I think that's where I was talking about too. What's kind of exciting about this morphic field is that I think we have a responsibility to clean up what we can clean up and to work on our lifestyle, whatever we can do to help
future generations that aren't even going to be related to us. But for me, that gives me some inspiration, I think, to realize that we are helping the species when we do our own work, whatever that might look like, whether that's, and as a therapist, I'm somebody who really thought it is important to get your own therapy, still do. And so I really dug deep into my own stuff when I was becoming a parent. And I've tried all kinds of different healing modalities, big into, I did all kinds of different diets. I did all kinds of different supplements, and was super into juicing, but also I've done EMD, different trauma modalities. I have trained in them, and hypnotherapy, and also was not just as a practitioner, but as a participant, as a client. And it's just been really an interesting journey that continues to unfold. And I'm just grateful for all of the different experiences of healing. So any modality of healing, I would say, if it resonates with you and you're like, I want to check out this way of healing, go for that. That's that's what I was thinking when you were talking.
Oh, no, that's really important, because that's why I said right at the beginning that a lot of the time healing is ahead of science. And just because there's no proof at the moment it's not going to work, if you want to try it, go for it. Then the other thing I think is really important to talk about is something I call spatial and temporal summation, that sometimes is the order in which you do your therapy that affects whether it works. So maybe, and nobody knows this order, and then that would be an example of doing it linearly, like, starting off with, say, circadian rhythm, then doing diet, then doing psychotherapy, and then doing Pilates. Whereas spatial summation would be more doing everything all at the same time and seeing if that works, because for some people you really need to hit everything hard, and that's why some people need to do the grounding, the red light, the way of eating, the sunset, the sunrise, the Pilates or the yoga or whatever, the EMDR and the hypnosis. They have to do it all at once, like an intensive, and that works for them. Whereas another person, it might be the sequence in which they do things. And just because something didn't work 10 years ago, it doesn't mean it might not work now. It just, when we talk about time and space in terms of quantum physics as well, sometimes it just wasn't the right time. So I never dismiss something. I just sometimes think, okay, that didn't work for you, not because it's wrong, just it wasn't the right time for you. And again, time is a very important thing, and dismiss something easily thinking, oh, it didn't work then. But it's all about being in the right place at the right time and having your biology, your neurology and your brain ready to receive that particular modality. And I completely agree with you. Curiosity, even though it killed the cat, apparently, I think that's always important, that always keep an open mind. And if you're really stuck, and I've been in places where I thought, well, I know all this stuff, I know pretty much everything, why am I still having a big mess with my own mental health? And it's like, and then you learn, actually there are so many rabbit holes and boxes and places you can go down. Never stop having hope, and you will find a solution eventually. Then to bring it all back to what you were saying about our relatives, the Exodus does say that the sins of our forefathers span 3 to 4 generations. And I think that's a very important thing to be as a parent, that you're not only influencing your children, you could potentially be influencing your great grandchildren. Even though you've departed from this planet, your actions and behaviors right now in 2023 could impact your great grandchildren right now. And do you want to have that responsibility?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Oh, you bring up such a good point. I was just thinking about this yesterday in terms of order. What order would I say now that I understand quantum biology and circadian biology and all of these? What would I do? Would I've done it any differently, or would we recommend for people? I don't think it matters, because you start where you can start. And for me, the food made a huge, getting the food right was really big in my own healing, but that might not be the case for someone else. The light might be more important, and or circadian rhythms may be more important, or cleaning up trauma. I call it cleaning up. That may not be the best expression, but processing and dealing with some of the trauma, you might have to do that before you can even get yourself to ground and go outside and utilize sunlight and to even care about the food piece. Like, a lot of things may not be working as well because you've got some, repressed, pushed down emotions or trauma that hasn't been dealt with. So I appreciate that you brought that up, because I was just thinking about that. So some people are going to be that kind of intensive, I'm all in, let me do all of it. And some people are going to need to take step by step. And I do really appreciate too that there are things that if you're not ready for it, the timing is really important too, and you can revisit. And I just saw a practitioner really poo-pooing curiosity. And I think her point was like, people just stay curious and never like sink into anything. I think that was her point. But I think of curiosity as like my signature strength, because I am so curious all the time. So that was a little triggered when I saw that. And I was like, wait a minute, curiosity is an important piece, especially if you don't feel good, to not get so hopeless and down on yourself there, but to continue to explore and search and see what resonates with you, what might be the right timing for now for your healing. So those are do you have thoughts about any of that?
Oh, yes, I do. Well, first of all, curiosity and shiny new object syndrome are two completely different things.
Right.
And when we break it down, what we find is a shiny new object is something that's a quick fix, or we can pay and we think it can go away. Whereas when it comes down to when we have to make a habit change, like changing our way of eating or getting up earlier or grounding, those seem unappealing because we have to put effort in. So therefore, we become extremely curious about, for example, an infoceutical that you can buy a chip and it can make your structured water into growth hormone, or something that's going to boost your serotonin. So instantly, a person like me is going to go straight for that chip because I don't have to do anything. I just have to buy it and drink it. Whereas really, to improve my growth hormone, I should be in bed by 9:30, asleep at 10, so I can make my own between 10 and 12. And then when, say, it comes to boosting my serotonin, rather than jumping down that curiosity wagon of the shiny new object, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these products, but if I went out and saw the sun at about 10 o'clock in the morning, I can make my own serotonin and it's free. It's just involves an effort. So I think I can completely understand that the person didn't make a distinction between shiny new object and being curious, because the other aspect of being curious is also always questioning, because I always question the science as well as the gurus, because especially food science is riddled with terrible studies that Coca-Cola and Nestle have funded. So again, I have to always remain curious about, well, who funded it? Who paid for it? Is this really true? Should dietitians be paid to say it's okay to have a Kit Kat or an Oreo because they've got shares in Coca-Cola? That's me being curious about the research. And then I'm always curious about, well, what is there that we don't understand very well about our bodies? And memory, I would say, is one of them. And no matter who you speak to, nobody can say for certain where memory is and how it works. So therefore, it means it's an open field for anybody from any background to try and help people either get rid of a bad memory or improve their memory, as in get rid of brain fog. So that's my thoughts on it. It depends on the context. And also having an inquiring mind and being curious is a very good way to not sort of get conned or, waste a load of money as well. So I think it's always, I would say, question and everything, be curious, have an inquiring mind, but don't do it to the point where you never actually put the effort into the hard stuff you don't really want to do.
Right. And maybe just being aware of when you're just how normal it is to not want to do the hard work. Of course, you're going to want to do the shiny new thing that, and just noticing that in yourself. if people listening are recognizing that and saying, oh, I think I'm like that. Yeah, that is not uncommon. That is something that's fairly common.
Oh, I think when it comes to being a human, we all open wide to addictions, and we're all open wide
Yeah.
to traumas, and we're all open wide to shiny new object syndrome. And it doesn't matter if you're Dave Asprey or Jeff Bezos or whoever, or Elon Musk. When you break it all down, they'll all tell you that they've succumbed to all of those three things at some point. So I completely agree with you. I think, you mustn't beat yourself up about the shiny new object syndrome, because sometimes genuinely you need to rifle through a lot of different things to find something that you can do to get started, because that's what's fundamentally important. I don't mind, what you do, just do something. Some of them know more than me about quantum biology, but then they're not doing anything. So you've got to find a time where, at least as long as you're doing something active. I don't mind if my clients go and find me really unusual red light therapies or things I've never heard of, as long as they're doing the grounding, the way of eating, or whatever that I've asked for, because it is really easy to pretend that watching podcasts or researching is doing something. And I'm guilty of that as well. And I think it's just about accepting your humanity and not beating yourself up, because as soon as you beat yourself up, you're creating trauma all over again. And I think that's a really important thing to talk about, is because I think obviously if food addiction was that easy to overcome, nobody'd have it. And I find a lot with my clients is they will go and do the behavior with food and beat themselves up. And I've just said, well, you've just put a load of trauma into yourself. And, it's something that we have to be really careful about, self-traumatizing as well. And I'm not sure what your thoughts are here. I'll just hand it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk about being kind and compassionate to ourselves. I think the word self-compassion gets tossed around a lot, and maybe people even roll their eyes, but I'm not kidding about it. Is very difficult to make consistent change, something that you can sustain, if you're not gentle with yourself in the process. I've seen that people feel like or clients have felt like they should be harder on themselves, that's going to help them, I don't know, work harder at it or do it more. And I've never found that to actually be true. It's usually the opposite, where you're working against yourself in that way. And so the more they can have compassion for themselves, be gentle, and really, I don't know the right words because I feel like they get overused, but you know what I'm saying here, is to be kind to themselves as they're making the changes. You can still hold yourself accountable and be responsible, but responsible is the ability to respond. And I've found that if you're beating yourself up and creating trauma for yourself, then you are actually getting in your own way and making it more difficult to respond, having the ability to respond in a different way the next time. So I have a lot of thoughts about that, but yeah, I'm along the same lines, because that's what I see with clients, is that when they can get gentle with themselves, they actually make the changes.
Oh, definitely. No, I completely agree, because, we're terrible at, some of the stuff we say to ourselves, we'd never even say to our worst enemies. And I think sort of back to what we were talking about the trauma, that I do actually sometimes think that whatever happened in people's past, they've already dealt with it, but they re-traumatize themselves, and that's what the problem is. And they keep blaming the thing that happened 20 years ago that they've already got over. So I always try with sessions, and that's why I love talking to you so much, because I think it should be fun as well, because it can be really fun to find like-minded people that you're on the same wavelength with, you can have a really good conversation with and share your weirdness with. Because I've just recently developed a friendship with a psychiatrist. You probably know her, called Rachel Brown.
I love Rachel. Yes, she's coming up on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel comfortable just Instagramming her my weirdness, and sometimes emailing somebody your weirdness is the scariest thing ever, because you don't know how they're going to react. And when you find a kindred spirit that you can just vibe with, that's also a really intelligent professional person, it's sort of a massive relief to know that yeah, everyone else is just as weird as me, and it doesn't matter if I make a mistake because other people do, but let's all get back on track together and laugh about it and kind of make it fun as well. And I think combating trauma with joy and happiness and laughter, that's an additional way to get rid of it. I mean, there are things like laughing yoga that people laugh their traumas away.
Oh, that's right.
And I'm just working currently now on combining movement and hypnosis, because I've done hypno movement before, but then, as I mentioned, the ether before, and some people that follow you might be interested in sacred geometry. Whereas, you know, if you could make specific shapes with your body and work under hypnosis and have your structured water under control, say if you got your red light out or rub some DMSO into yourself. So it's kind of hitting everything from different angles and from a quantum perspective, but then make it fun as well, and see if we can get the trauma out that way. Because like we were saying, I don't know if the trauma is in the mitochondria or in the structured water or in the morphic field or in everything. And I do definitely think you can get it out. But I think you touched on a really important point about, you know, you can spend thousands of dollars on EMDR and stuff, but stop putting the trauma back in yourself. And I think us being horrible to ourselves has a much bigger effect than we think. And it's very easy to blame our aunts, uncles, grandparents, parents. And of course, there's emerging science that there's a lineage along the timeline, but we've got to again remember that we talk to ourselves 24/7, and we have to be really careful what we say.
Oh, I agree. I had so many things pop in my head when you were talking, and I'm like, oh yes, I love having the weirdness. I love finding a tribe of people where you can communicate about these things, and we share our weirdness, and it's fabulous. Because it doesn't seem that weird to me, that we're all excited about similar things, and we can be on different pages about certain things, and that just makes me more curious. It makes me think. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think about it that way, or I had a different view about something. So I really appreciate that part of having friends all over the world now that are like-minded folks. And I just I'm going to ask you more about this. I love the idea of the movement and the joy, and then doing these other kinds of modalities and putting it in place. What else do you do with your clients? Like, what do you have them do on their own in that, maybe for their structured water or whatever it is, so that they're experiencing that not just in session, but outside of session? When I find that that's when I did the most work personally. So the session can be really good, but then most of the work is integrating it after the session.
Oh no, you've brought up a really important point there, because that's why I'm kind of bringing in some of my old training, like functional neurology and Pilates, back in, because that's something that, again, the in between the sessions, people could easily do more. And I've got so much experience with movement, and for some reason my brain is separated changing your circadian rhythm and diet from doing functional neurology and Pilates, whereas absolutely anybody can move about. So when I've changed my intake form, and now I you know, you kind of see glaring faults. That's like I was saying to you earlier, some people know more than me about carnivore diets and functional sort of quantum biology, but they're not moving at all. So I think it's about looking for the deficit now, because some people can do things without me. I mean, I can't put food in somebody's mouth or in their cupboards or whatever. They have to be responsible for what they buy. However, I can encourage people to do maybe even a 15-minute daily movement practice that resonates with them, because some men think Pilates is silly, whereas they're really interested in sacred geometry and stuff like that. So I can say, okay, this movement pattern that takes 15 minutes that you do outside when you're grounding is a very traditional movement, and it can do X, Y, and Z for your energy. So they'll happily go off and do that. So I think it's about what I need to find when I make programs for what to do in between. It's back to what I was saying before. It's what they least want to do is where I need where I need to encourage them the most, and actually text them every day. Like I won't say his name, but I have a client who really knows everything, but he just can't start his way of eating. So it literally had to be, right, text me when you're going to start this fast, and tell me what you're going to eat for the next 7 days, and text me every single day to tell me how you're doing. And it's been profoundly life-changing, because normally the person he worked with before would just tell him to eat the carnivore, and he couldn't do it because he would just drink or binge eat. And then he'd come back 2 weeks later to say, oh, I've messed everything up because the other person didn't text them. I'm not saying I'm any better. I just, it's about finding out where's their deficit, because this client, you know, he could write a book on quantum biology and carnivore diets, but he can't do it yet. So therefore what I would do with him in between sessions was just tell me what you're doing today, and that's all. And that made a big difference to him. And there are some issues with movement and stuff, but I'll come back to that later. And I think from what you've said, finding out what to do in between the sessions would be something that somebody really doesn't want to do, and they need to tell me that they've done it. Like me, I'm really untidy. So if I was to employ somebody, including you, it would be to ask me and show you, have you tidied things up? Because do it by myself. I know it sounds the most stupid thing ever, but I used to think feng shui and sacred geometry was a load of nonsense, and I'm completely converted now. Yet because I'm so untidy, I'm incapable of making tidiness until somebody's going to come and I can show it to them. So I think when it comes to the clients, it's about just being honest. Where are your weaknesses? And we don't like admitting those, especially if we're practitioners. And we all have them. And I've got clients who are way cleverer than me, and sort of CEOs and doctors and stuff. And you'd be really shocked at their weaknesses. And that's why they need somebody, just, I think, to be accountable, to show you, okay, I've got this problem. I'm totally fine with it. Here's the best I'm doing to try and fix it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just anything to sort of deal with the chaos, because my room or my house is chaos central, yet I'm excellent at anything to do with biology. My biological internal organization and inflammation and chaos is really low, but I'm living in an external environment of chaos. So I think it's back to just bringing everything back to the chaos. It can also be looked at where in your life or diet or whatever you're doing is the most chaos, where we can together create some order, and you can just show me this order.
I love that. That's so clear. Like, where's the chaos? And I think that's often where we don't want to look because it's chaotic. I just talked about blind spots this week. To me, that would be like an area that you just don't want to do. You just don't want to look at it. I don't want to deal with it. But then to have the support, that's exactly what I was saying. Like, what kind of support do people need, and how can they get it? If it's a coach or some accountability partner, I think that's why, AA and all the different groups, recovery groups work, because there's an accountability there where you can come in a non-judgmental, preferably, place where you can say, okay, this is what I've tried, and this is the mess that I made of my week. So here, but I don't think we're meant to clean up the chaos. I don't think we're meant to do all this alone. And so to have some way to get support around that feels really important to me. And whatever ways you can get support. And when you're clear about your chaos, when you're clear about the places that are a deficit in your life, I think once you get real about that, you're probably more able to attract the teacher or the therapist or the coach or whoever you need, the friend, to help with the accountability on that. But I could be wrong.
Oh, no, I completely agree with you, because I think chaos is a much funnier and kinder word to say, look, hey, Kelly, I've got really chaotic eating, rather than saying I've got binge eating, because that's really can be quite embarrassing, or even worse to say I've got bulimia. Whereas just to say, hello, I've got chaotic eating, and any therapist is going to understand what that means. Or I've got a chaotic sort of schedule, or I've got a chaotic lifestyle. Can you help me? And it avoids this idea of attacking yourself. And like me in my chaotic house, it avoids me attacking myself and saying I'm like a slob or a savage, or just really messy. If I can just say to somebody, I'm living in chaos, can you help me? And in a way, of all the people I should employ, it would be, and I'd love to employ so many different people to work with me, I really need a feng shui person, even because it's like, where's the biggest amount of chaos in my life? And it's in my environment. And I think the word chaos is sort of quite funny, that we can all relate to it. It's very scientific. And when we want to break it down back into quantum physics, we need to put in order to create order or reduce entropy, we've got to put energy in, or effort. So we accept that, okay, that this chaos, we can't pay to make it go away. We can't stuff it under the carpet. Whoever is going to have to put some energy or effort in to get rid of the chaos, and it will be worth it at the end. And I think it just softens the blow, because of course we don't want to be hard on ourselves, but fundamentally we've got to just face up to the fact that we're doing something wrong. And I think just sometimes calling it something else, and then saying we're going to bring order to this problem, is actually a very simple way for the subconscious to think, okay, there's a mess, you're bringing order, I can help you there. And it doesn't involve taking away a drug or losing weight or whatever, because the subconscious hates the word loss, or don't like that. And no, please don't take away the chocolate or the cannabis or the cocaine. But if you come in and say, I'm going to bring order to your chaotic lifestyle, it's like, okay, I don't mind that, I can accept that way of moving forward. So that's my sort of way of taking quantum physics into sort of therapy and making it simpler for people to understand. And also, when you talk to subconsciouses, they do operate on a very different level to the conscious mind, and you have to be a little bit careful about how you phrase things. And that's why I'm very much into, just, be careful with your own self-talk. And, I'm guilty of it as well, especially around my period. Some of the stuff I say is like, have I been possessed by an alien or something? And I have to really just think, don't be stupid. You're just having period talk. Don't act on or believe any of that you just said to yourself. But other people think it's real, and it's really destructive. Whereas if we just come back to the idea of creating order out of chaos, whether it's in our eating, our mitochondria, our circadian rhythm, our exercise, our messy house, or whatever it is that we've got, our business, our accounting, that's another one I've made great big mess in. So that was easy. I could hire an accountant and get zero, but I still have to put some effort in. So I think it's, again, just sitting down and thinking about, where have I got the most chaos, and who can help me with this particular species of chaos.
Yes, I love that. That is a perfect way to kind of bring it all back to from where we started. Because when you first mentioned chaos, I thought, I don't know, it didn't land the same way. It is kind of a funny term too. And it's much easier for me to say, oh, we're going to deal with the chaos that I have in my nervous system. My nervous system is a little chaotic right now. It's just a whole lot easier, not even just like the chaos of my exterior house or something that could be going on internally. I'm going to work on that. Makes it a much more approachable way to handle it. And I love that you're like, we're just going to bring order there. So where do we need support there? And then we've got to own it. You're going to have to put some energy in. I think that's where I get really sort of adamant with people of you've got to take responsibility, or it's not going to happen. And not to beat up on yourself if you don't, but just to realize that it's going to take energy to make order where there's chaos. So I love that. Thank you so much for that, Sara. This was a really helpful piece. This was important for me today. I'm always amazed that, speaking of timing, how the universe works, and you just hear what you need to hear when you need to hear it. And I really appreciate what you're bringing today.
Great. And I suppose just so we can wrap it up, I think what people have to remember is we're really resilient as human beings. And whether you want to call it a chaos bucket or a threat bucket or a stress bucket, when it's too full, it overflows and we get pain or anxiety or whatever. But even if you can get rid of some of the chaos, it's like a bucket. It might be that you got rid of a quarter of the water in the bucket and now it's not overflowing anymore. So even a relatively small or just a change in one part of your life, if there's lots of chaos all over the place, I've found that just clearing up one patch of chaos can reduce this chaos or threat bucket enough that I can actually be happy and have joy again, even though there's still other things wrong with my life, which there are. I don't mind as much, and then it makes it much easier for me to deal with that chaos when I'm ready, because I think overwhelm is also something that scares people. It causes freezing, that there's so much wrong, people don't know where to start. And all I'm saying is that if you just pretend you've got a chaos or a threat bucket and you can take some of the water out, it's going to stop overflowing, and magically you'll think, oh, actually I can deal with everything all over again after all, even though last week when I was still eating what I shouldn't be or doing what I shouldn't be, I thought I couldn't cope. And magically now I've taken away a big chunk of chaos. I feel like now I can tackle my exercise, my house, my business, my children, my partner, because there's so many things that can create chaos for us. So I think it's just important to know that you have to take away some chaos to feel the effect, and it spurs you on to want to empty that bucket more and more and more and more, because the emptier the bucket, the more, if life throws chaos at you, it's not going to suddenly make your bucket overflow. You've got more resilience because there was less in the bucket to start with, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Yeah. And I think resilience is directly related to the lessening the chaos in the bucket or the stress or whatever people want to call that, when that bucket is not full, when it's lower, because your life will hand you things that are going to add chaos, then you're able to handle it. So to me, that is the image of resilience right there. And that is a beautiful way to wrap us up. I appreciate that so much. And I appreciate your time. I mean, we could talk for hours and hours and hours. Is there anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't get to?
No, I think we covered everything without getting too complicated with genetics. And I think it's just to really reinforce to people that of course, data is really important, and these SNPs or SNPs that you get and your DNA reports can be quite alarming. It's like the DNA is a piano and you're the pianist. So don't think that it's the gospel, and remember it's only 20% is your blueprint and 80% is what you do. Even if some of it's to do with your relatives, no matter what, your relatives are always going to have done really amazing things, because obviously life was much harder back then. So they are going to pass you on good things as well. They might pass you on some dodgy things too, but don't forget they're going to pass you on really good things too. And I think that's I want to just close on that the DNA is the car and you're the driver. So remember that you've got a lot of control over, your genes, your chaos and stuff like that.
I love that. I like those metaphors better than the gun, because we've all heard that the genes load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. I like the idea of that, our DNA is the car, but we're the driver. Like we have a lot of say, and we have a lot that we can do to reduce our chaos if we're willing to put in the energy to do that. So
oh, absolutely. And also when they did the Human Genome Project, so they were expecting 100,000 genes and there were about 20 to 25. And then we were ridiculously similar to chimpanzees, but even more ridiculously similar to other people. So even though we like to say, oh, variety is the spice of life, we're all individuals, when you break it down to the DNA sequence, like we're literally clones in some ways. So again, and yet when you look at human beings, we're so hugely diverse in our shape, our creativity, our talents, our weaknesses. So again, something else played a role there. And It's not to say that genetic tests are not useful data, but they're just a small part of the health jigsaw, and not to take it as gospel, but not to, totally dismiss it either. Because obviously, just for covering our own back, somebody might have a genetic predisposition for hemochromatosis, where they have to mind their iron intake, or somebody might have an APO4 mutation. They've got to mind certain ways of eating, but they're kind of, not common. So that's all I want to close with, to say, it's not medical advice to say don't ignore your DNA sequence, but from a scientific point of view, don't take it, as you say, like a horrible loaded gun or a horrible hand of cards that you've been dealt.
Right. Yes. And I can personally really appreciate that, because we can get bogged down there, and remember that you're driving this car. So let's
playing piano, whatever,
You're playing this piano. Oh yes, I like that one too. You're playing this piano. That's beautiful. So thank you very much, Sara. I appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. It's always so much fun to talk to you. And I will make sure that people know how to find you at Busy Superhuman, everything.
Yes, I've got a YouTube channel, and I've got TikTok and Instagram, and you're welcome to sort of follow along with that. And I'm going to be talking to Kelli now on my YouTube channel, so you can get to know a little bit about her. And anybody who's listening who would like to be a guest on my YouTube channel, please reach out, because it's for sort of like-minded people and from all different backgrounds. And I've got basically 6 signature questions that people have to answer, and you can say whatever you want, because I don't use ads on my channel, and you can promote yourself as well. And I've got an engaged audience that loves to meet new people.
Yes, you have a majorly engaged audience, which is really lovely that you've done that. So yes, so hopefully people will go find you. And I'm looking forward to being interviewed by you very soon.
Great.